I'm halfway through the work week.
I know, it's like hump day.
Yeah,
Oh,
I work 410s now.
oh, nice. 4 10-hour shifts.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you work an extra hour or two in the day.
2, yeah.
Okay. What time you getting off now?
5:30,
Oh, okay. And you get in there what?
7 a.m.
Oh, okay. You do the earlier shift.
Yeah. Well, you can do 6 to 4:30 too, but I thought that was pushing it.
Yeah, that sounds like it. So, obviously, today I kind of wanted to target the conversation toward extroverted sensing, considering that it's your dominant function and kind of your history with that. What is it like being a dominant extroverted sensor? What is the kind of your personal experience, and what do you see as extroverted sensing like when you're operating in that mode?
It's like everyone senses, but better.
Yeah. So is it like, do you have like a personal experience, like where you feel like you rely on sensing a lot more than say something else, or like an intuitive hunch, or how do you make those comparisons?
I think it's more maybe the difference between like, do you know much about like computer science?
Not. I can't really say I know a lot about it now, but
I don't either. But if you know anything about like integer versus floating point,
Yes.
I think of it kind of like everyone has integer, not everyone has floating point.
Okay.
So sensors, especially a dominant extroverted sensor, has like every possible arithmetic logic unit devoted to senses.
Okay. So they have more of a longer, essentially the digit stream, and
Yeah.
that's with you would be more specific when it comes to sensory experience.
Right.
Okay.
That's how I think of it, at least.
I was reading a book earlier this week, and it was about extroverted sensing. And the book, it wasn't the whole book about extroverted sensing, but there was a portion in there that mentioned how the extroverted sensing is like on a if it's one of your preferred functions, that your brain is kind of just in this dormant electrical state where all areas of the brain are just getting low supply of energy, but it's kind of going back and forth, creating a consistent current. So it doesn't have to start something up. It can just redirect real quick and activate a region of your brain. This is one of the reasons why I call like extroverted people who prefer extroverted sensing like very realistic tacticians, because they're able to operate in the moment. Whereas other types actually have to repower that area of the brain, and it takes a while to charge up from nothing. Extroverted sensing has low power directed to all areas of the brain, so it can react any given moment exactly how it needs to react.
Was that Dario Nardi's book?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, did you read that?
Not yet, but I've seen him do a talk at the Google campus.
Okay.
And a couple of other things like NF Geeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's what fascinated me about that, and I wonder what your experience was with that. I mean, how does it feel? Because obviously you see the world through an entirely different lens than what I see it through. So to me, it's fascinating to see like what exactly it is that you see when it comes to your perceiving and being able to react in the moment, versus say someone else like me or any other type that it's just not as present or not as active.
I have a track at work, not like a running track, but my hospital is built on a campus, and there's a connecting walkway that goes, well, basically that stays indoors, and then there's another one outdoors in the quad. And I think of it like there were a bunch of people outside walking a couple months ago, because we're in the Nashville area, it's warm enough, and there was a branch high up on a tree that was loose, and I'm just naturally inclined to look at the entire tree. And when I see something not swaying with the rest of it, I lock on. And I went and got engineering because a lot of low probability things would have to line up, but someone could have really been hurt by that branch if it had landed the wrong way. And so no one else noticed out of everyone out there walking. But
yeah, nobody. So you pretty much instantly picked up on it and you resolve the issue while no one else did, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I habituate to things pretty quickly if things are going according to their pattern. But if they're not, of course, just like someone's face changing, I'm going to lock onto it very, very quickly. Just like, I can't remember where I read it now, but it's entirely true, at least for me. And it said ESTPs cannot determine someone's internal state unless it's being expressed on their face.
Yeah. Yeah, because that sensory information it's what's valid, and they don't trust any intuitive hunches naturally. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah, like I don't have enough data to make that assumption based on what I'm seeing right now.
Right. But as soon as it changes, I can see it very, very quickly.
Right. Right. So when it comes to that, that's a good starting point. When it comes to that particular area of understanding, say, extroverted sensing in a nutshell, when you're able to pick up on that change, what is it like in the world of relationships, whether it's friendships or other people that may not be as expressive? What is do you have difficulty with that? Is that a natural challenge for you? How does that work?
Can you say that again?
How does that work in the sense of, like, for you, when, if anything changes in real life, working with, friendships or, relationships or, even, colleagues or anything, when you, with people that aren't as expressive, like a lot of people just don't express a lot on their face. They're just kind of more flat faced or flat appearanced in the sense of being a little more emotionally expressive. Have you had trouble with people like that, or have it just had most people you're able to pick up on it via sensory cues?
Well, I'm sure when I was younger, I would say things maybe that were untoward, and then I'd see someone's face. And of course, since I can't tell an internal state unless it's really, really obvious, I was like, oh, did I go too far?
Yeah. And that's what I was wondering, because maybe somebody that's like an inferior introverted feeler like me, it would be hard to determine their state because a lot of it's just not expressed. And I was just wondering if you had any personal experience or stories to share with that.
Well, personally, I think that, just my own take is, if I don't get congruence between, like, tone of voice, other various just nonverbals plus the expression on someone's face, I think they're lying.
Okay, so you need that congruency. If somebody's like, their body language is doing this and then their face is doing that, there's some kind of disconnect. You assume that you have that assumption, I guess, that there's that introverted intuition that's assuming they're lying because something's not congruent. Is that what you are saying, that you're still relying on introverted intuition to make that assumption, but it's still based in an essence of sensory data?
Probably. It's like when someone is, it's common on TV shows or movies. Someone is, smiling to maintain an appearance at a distance, but in reality is saying, I know where the bodies are buried. The FBI agents are on their way. Have fun for the next 20 to 40.
Wow.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's pretty intense, though. If you ask me, that's pretty intense. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, obviously, you're looking for that congruency. You're looking for that synchronicity between somebody's actions and even their words.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of times I guess for me, sometimes it's a gut feeling. If I'm relying on intuition, it's just something triggered something in me where I'm just like, that's not going to work. And I just know it's just not going to work. And it's hard to say what that exact thing is. And then somebody may say, can you tell me why? And I'm just like, I got to give you some information. I don't have it right now. I just know it's just not going to work. And that's whereas you'll have that sensory cue, you'll have that sensory data. So like you said, it's more of a more detailed sensing than my example. But again, I would be referring to that intuition first.
Well, also now, if I'm evaluating if something's going to work or not, in any cases not covered by instructions, we revert to training. And since I've been to business school, if it's any sort of a business problem, I'm going to think through it in the methods I was taught. So there's that part of it too. But at the same time, the sensor part of me will still shine through in my best subjects, which would be things like operations management, process engineering.
Okay, can you kind of give an example on that?
Sure. So I had an internship actually doing process engineering. So I was working at a military hospital in Colorado Springs. I might have said this the last time, so you get that feeling. But anyway, a bunch of well-paid bureaucrats were compiling reports every week, making really, really long PowerPoint presentations, but based on grabbing reports out of some database, highlighting a bunch of fields, and then updating some Excel spreadsheet, using the spreadsheet to update the PowerPoint. It was very time and money intensive when you're talking about multiple people spending like 2 hours a week on this when they make $65,000 a year. And so my internship boss had already devised a plan, but we needed to justify it monetarily. That's why it went to Lean Six Sigma level. And what happened was, got a message.
Yeah.
So, what was it? Oh, we had to map a bunch of database information, like wherever they were going to access things, grabbed it out of the back end, and then he wrote a dashboard in Access. If you know anything about databases, everyone hates Access, but everyone has it because the US government owns, max level of Microsoft Office. But through that, we were able to save that hospital $24,000 a month.
Well, that's a pretty significant change. And what part of that scenario would you feel that really highlighted that extroverted sensing that you use? Like, what was the moment where you're like, I have to have a solution here? It comes, boom, and you kind of were able to act on that as quickly as possible.
So once I had everything mapped, I'm definitely
once you saw it, you just had like. So can you? What I'm trying to get is a very specific example of how extroverted sensing like even reinforces what Dario and Artie said, which is like being able to act immediately based on sensory data. And that's what I'm trying to get locked down a good, easy example of how that actually happens. Because obviously I don't live in the world of extroverted sensing. So for me, it's trying to just narrow down this conversation to really grab that essence and kind of demonstrate, okay, let's see how it works in this scenario. Why is it considered a faster action function in the data of perception? Because you make decisions with introverted logic, but that extroverted sensing, how fast it perceives, and then immediately how it resolves problems. ESTPs are known as the natural troubleshooters. They're very, very efficient or effective at troubleshooting when a problem arises in the environment. Yet sometimes they're seen as not being able to think ahead because they act on a problem immediately and don't necessarily consider the outcome. And so that's what I'm really looking to narrow down is like, okay, there's a picture of where can you see that extroverted sensing working, and where can you see more of an introverted intuition playing a role as an inferior function in the ESTP's performance?
Well, I'd say in my case then, so at least I can still use what I had just said for a minute or two, but I tend to think of things like I was saying with the mapping. My mind goes right to it. Like, especially being a visual learner, I'm very attracted to patterns that I can remember easily. And the various methods of tracking things, like, the fishbone diagram or swim lanes, if you've ever seen those.
Yeah, I haven't, so I couldn't relate to that, but keep going because I'm listening.
Other people can check it while they're watching.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So they can look it up. But yeah, so like I said, just keep going, throw out examples, because a lot of our viewers may see that there's something they know or relate to.
And so I see it in terms of like value-added process mapping.
Okay.
And it's through that, I mean, obviously it's a highly abstracted concept in that, whereas in one case you're using it with databases, in another case you're going through departments or an assembly line or just various other functions at, commercial enterprise, public agencies, whatever the case is. And so I'm thinking in those terms. I'm just mapping the whole thing in my brain, kind of visually thinking how many stops does this have to make, and probably what's the value added time, what's the non-value added time, how many non-value added steps are there in there, how many people probably needed to be informed about something and weren't, and then what did that all cost in the end, thanks to accounting. And then I kind of spit out the answer a few seconds later.
Yeah, that actually is a really good example, because everything you just stated was very much about the details, what actually happened, and that's a really, really good thing to have in operations. If any viewers are in business, they understand that the details are very, very critical in process management like that. So that's a great example. That's kind of what I was looking for, just an example to see where you can see the intuition, knowing like, okay, here's what's going to happen next, but ultimately serving that primary sensing data. Here's what it is. Here's the facts. But yet you saw the intuition go, okay, here's what's going to happen next. Here's probably what happened as a result, and where we can go from there. But it sounds like your focus was definitely on the details and the actual information that was there and present.
Right.
Yeah. And so that was a great example. Okay. Trey, he was here on the last video, and he has his own channel, obviously Trey 4L. He mentioned he mentioned it, I guess, a couple weeks ago, that I'm actually working on a video series right now in regards to actually developing these cognitive functions and going into how each of them grows and develops, and they're nurtured by what people choose to do and what they choose not to do. Do you have any advice for people that are looking at promoting extroverted sensing in their personality, or at least tapping into that area? What would you recommend as being a dominant extroverted sensor, would you say is an area for them to develop?
Well, they just look at the fine arts. See if there's anything you can do well or moderately well or just enjoy, and just develop it. Like, I'm not particularly good at drawing. I have very nice handwriting, which I'm told is a line drawing, but I can't draw for realism or make a self-portrait or anything. My main strength is in music. And so I just went for it. I played percussion for 7 years, all through middle and high school. I played again in college. And even now, this is mostly, I'm guessing, thanks to a combination of extroverted sensing and introverted thinking. But I mean, at one point, a community band putting on a Christmas concert asked me to come and sight read during a concert.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you react to that when that happened? Were you like, yeah, absolutely? Or were you more like, maybe? Or what was your reaction to that?
Well, they only asked me to do it for one show because someone couldn't show up or was sick or something. So I just went ahead and did it, kind of gritting my teeth. Because I can tell you that the least favorite part about all those band competitions was sight reading, for me at least. Never liked that part.
And so when you were kind of put in that position, were you able to, obviously we're talking about looking at potentially developing extroverted sensing. The part that interests me most about when I kind of dove in to really finish the extroverted series portion of extroverted sensing, the series portion of that, which I've actually done. It's not published yet, but it's actually finished. And that series, the part that really interested me the most was just being able to see the world in a different lens than I see it naturally. Is there any way you can describe how you experience the world? Like for people like intuitive preference or like us that may not see it the same way you do, is there any way you could potentially describe what it feels like to be a dominant extroverted sensor?
I notice everything the way you produce possibility. It's just something I can't shut off.
Right. So it's like just noticing kind of everything, and your attention is on everything in the environment, the here and the now, and just experiencing that sensory data. And for me, it's like I could potentially be completely, because, introverted intuition and extroverted sensing, they have this suppressive relationship where if you're using one, it suppresses the other. So because I have a preference for introverted intuition, for me, it's always, I could go deep into introverted intuition to where I literally will check out of reality. And yeah, and so that's like, I could be sitting in a room full of people and I stop hearing everybody. Everybody just disappears. And I can just start hearing what's actually the dialogue in my head. And for me, it's like I can just create dialogue that's coming from not even past experience, but what I could see as a possibility in the future. This is what's going to happen. Here's how it's going to happen. I can kind of go in this deep, I don't know, transcendental state or whatever people want to call it. And my focus is so much on that intuition. Whereas, I was reading about dominant extroverted sensors, and it's like they become so in tune with the environment that when they feel like if they start losing that touch with, this is just obviously what I've read, when they feel like they're losing that touch with the environment, they may feel like they're not grounded anymore and they get uncomfortable. Have you ever had an experience where, maybe you weren't connected to the environment as much as you normally are, and how did it make you feel?
I can tell you, being sick always does that. Anytime that's affecting you negatively, like every time you get an ear infection and your hearing goes, even in one ear, it's like, I have half my hearing. What's the matter? Now, so the obvious solution is just go to the doctor, but it's like one of my, like 1/10 of my entire sensory ability is just gone.
Yeah, and that's it. So it feels like that, say, when you get sick, where you're kind of losing touch with your senses, or you're not as in tune with your senses. I can only imagine how stressful that is for somebody who relies on that information so intensely.
Oh yeah.
And so is there any, like a back I asked, I guess, about 5 minutes ago, what I was looking at was kind of like targeting developing extroverted sensing. Would you say that it's fair to recommend to any viewers that if somebody's interested in developing extroverted sensing, is just stop judging things in the moment and start just trying to hear, see, smell, taste, and feel everything around them, and not place a judgment or emphasis on it, just be present?
Yeah, there's being present in the moment. But also, Kiersey calls SPs the artisans, and there's a lot to that. Just finding a way to appreciate things that require a skilled use of your senses or your various appendages. Music requires skilled use of your hands, sometimes your feet, your mouth, all these various things. Getting good at speaking. Public speaking for a lot of people is really scary. Thanks to music, I would say I attribute it to that. I was never really scared to give speeches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so they would be just kind of getting involved in things. I like the word, and when I went through Please Understand Me by Kirsty, it was like, okay, artisans. Biased, removed ESTP from that because it's such a unique, they're all unique, but ESTP is just one of those, it's logic and sensing, and sometimes ESTPs can appear to be unlike the rest of the artisans.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was like, okay, well, I kind of naturally had a disconnect originally. Now I don't, but in the beginning, I was like, man, ESTPs just don't seem like the artisan type. And that was a bias of my own, but it was like, I see more of a in the moment troubleshooter than I saw as someone who was more involved with the arts and they're using their hands. But now I see it differently. I see them as artisans and being able to experience that, because obviously I dug in and I said, you know what, I've got to do my research. Why did this expert throw all these people into one category, these SPs? And now it made a lot more sense when you understand what extroverted sensing is and where their focus is when it comes to taking in information. And that to me, it was exciting to see, because you can start seeing the world through other people's lenses. I have a ESTP friend that, like, if he's not stimulated by some kind of external activity, he will fall asleep.
Nice.
Yeah, like
really good with the ladies.
Yeah, the same guy. Yep. I actually have a picture of him asleep when him and his wife. Well, I mean, I was talking. Okay, so it was me, him, and his wife, and we were all talking, and we had a very, very theoretical discussion. It somehow slanted to be theoretical because his wife is an INFP. And so her and I started going off in this theoretical tangent where the data was no longer there. It seemed to be, for him, it was like, none of this really matters because it's not practical. It's not here and now. So next thing you know, he pulls out his guitar and he starts playing his guitar in the middle of the conversation. And she's like, oh, I can't hear myself think. And you could see that dynamic there where he's just playing his guitar. And then after a while, it's like we were still talking, trying to talk over the guitar. And then he realized nobody was paying attention. And it wasn't like, oh, he quit, like he's frustrated, nobody paid attention. He's just like, nobody's paying attention to the guitar. He was just trying to entertain himself. And he's like, I'm not having enough. You could tell the lack of sensory stimulation from practical, tangible data from the sensory environment. It was quiet. There was no TV. There was no sound. There was no music. And so next thing you know is he falls asleep like with his arms wrapped around the guitar. And so his wife and I took photos of him just falling asleep with his guitar. And it was hilarious because it captured, we both are very big Myers-Briggs fans, and we captured it. We just labeled it, captioned like ESTP. Yeah, because the sensory, it was iconic because he was asleep with his guitar embraced. It wasn't like he put the guitar down and went to sleep. He just fell asleep while playing his guitar. And it's just that, and I've noticed that is if he's not moving, and he's super hyperactive, like he's very, very hyperactive. And, he's just moving. And the thing about it is, it's just like the minute you sit him down and just try to nullify or just quiet all the sensory experience, it's like he'll just go to sleep. And interestingly enough, Nardi talked about that. He said that they can actually fall asleep if they're not stimulated enough. And it's that's just that back and forth, that brain, it's such a low frequency. He said it's almost like they're asleep, but they're unconsciously awake is what I think the words he used, unconsciously awake. And it's because their every brain region has such a low frequency being distributed to it. So when a problem does come up, they can react to it immediately versus they don't have to charge that area of the brain up because it's already got a low frequency. They just turn it on and redirect. And and that's what was really interesting was, wow. And I started relating to that, and I started trying to put myself in his shoes. And I wonder how he sees the world. If he sees the world like, seeking the novelty that he seeks and the ability of him to adapt in the moment. And that's what I thought was really interesting was I read enough about extroverted sensing where I could start seeing it through a different lens. And I was like, this is really fascinating, seeing how somebody can feel that way or see things that way. And I can kind of go into extroverted sensing because it is one of my preferenced functions. It's just underneath, obviously, the top two. And because it's a tertiary function for me, I can connect to it and I can feel it at times. But it's like a teenage function. It's not quite developed like, say, an ESTP's dominant. And for me, I'm willing to let it go for my intuitive hunches. Whereas, my ESTP friend, he's like, everything's here now. And as soon as something gets too impractical or it's theoretical, it's just like you lose his attention. It's not because he's not interested in the theoretical. It's just it doesn't have a real grounding for him, and that's what he trusts, and that's the information he trusts. And I think that was a good understanding of where his function works, because in the moment he's a great tactician in the moment. I mean, he can react on a dime so quickly, and that's why I'm like, wow, this guy's good. Like, he's really good. He knows what to say, how to say it. So somebody will say something, and he's good at pivoting very quickly. And being able to take the conversation in a direction he wants it to go in based on any sensory information. And then I ask him, and I go, hey, how did you know how to react immediately in that moment? Because I'm interested in trying to understand what the world looks like through his lens. And he just said, that's what they said. He made it not complicated. He goes, that's what they said. And I felt like that was an appropriate response. And I was like, you didn't think about that beforehand, did you? And he goes, absolutely not. He's like, I had the data right in front of me I needed, and then I reacted to it. Whereas us introverted intuitives will hear something, and it's like we have to process it, and then we may have that. For ENTJs, since it's extroverted sensing, the tertiary function, we're a lot more comfortable working in the moment than, say, an INTJ, which that inferior extroverted sensing, where they have this, I don't trust data. I have more of I'll act in the moment if I need to, but I prefer not to. Yeah. It's I
have a quote. I was looking for it while you were talking about your friend spooning the guitar.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's from Battlestar Galactica, the 2004 relaunch. And it was, I forgot, Sam Anders. There we go. I think he was played by Michael Trucco. He's a professional pyramid player. And he was being interviewed by the Battlestar Galactica version of ESPN, sitting in an ice bath, talking about pyramid and the game that they just had. Look, that was a great game. What are your reactions? But he had this really neat quote. I just love it. I think it's kind of the heart of an ESTP, because that is about the way I would type him: ESTP, ISTP.
And who is this guy? I'm going to look this up.
It's from Battlestar Galactica.
Okay, I'm going to make a new window here, and I'm going to make sure to pull it up and look it up. Sorry, and what's his name exactly?
Just look for Moments of Perfection quote.
Quote. Is it the Samuel Anders?
Yeah. It's on goodreads.com.
I found one on IMDb, but let me see if I can find one on Goodreads. Yeah, quotes. I think I found it. All right. Yeah, go ahead and what is this? What is the quote?
I'll just read it. Look, you want to know the truth? I don't really care about the stats or the cup or the trophy or anything like that. In fact, the games aren't even that important to me. Not really. What matters to me is the perfect throw, making the perfect catch, perfect step and block, perfection. That's what it's about. It's those moments when you can feel the perfection of creation, the beauty of physics, the wonder of mathematics, the elation of action and reaction. And that is the kind of perfection that I want to be connected to.
Yeah, that is definitely a dominant extroverted sensor.
Yeah.
And just mastering that craft right in the moment.
Yeah. So you have to remember, we are, just like the rest of our SP brethren, we are just total technique junkies. That's part of that whole being in the moment. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was not the best team soccer player, even though I really wanted to be. The problem was I had a lot more access to a ball and a garage door than I did 10 other people. And so this is actually part of why I thought I was introverted for so long, is because I did so many things sports-wise just by myself. And, it could be just more of a simple logistics issue.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting thing. What inspired you to get into sports? Like, I'll give you an example. Like, I really never cared like about performing in sports. It really just never excited me. I just didn't feel the attachment to it at all. Like, I would play soccer when I was in grade school, simply because I liked physical activity. But as far as like the sport itself, I never really got into that. So what really inspired you to get into sports? What's your experience like with it?
Well, soccer, because that was my main sport. That was the only sport I ever played in high school. And actually, I think it was because I'm left-footed. So they needed me all up and down the left side. And of course, being me, I was just obsessed with technique. Just how to place the ball. Where do I need to feel it on my foot? You know, what does it take to make the ball go up and sideways, and you know, all the various kind of trick shots that you do. Like, eventually you have to start putting a spin on the ball. And then if you ever hear anything about the pros do not have very many moves. They have usually only 3 or 4. The catch is that they can do them at a full sprint. So that's the next phase, is what few things can I commit to doing so well that I can do them at an all-out sprint. And you know, that was probably the biggest draw for me, is, okay, what are those moves? So when you're in secondary school, you're learning all of them. But I think they never say anything about it, but I'm guessing they want you to pick the 3 or 4 that you decide you can do. I mean, maybe that you don't get tired of practicing as much as the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you just kind of go from there. Like,
it sound what I heard too was you mentioned, you know, where does it feel on the foot, and you're relying again on your senses. How does it need to connect, and how does it need to? Whereas an intuitive preference, well, me, for example, if I wanted to learn how to kick a ball or whatever I needed to do to accomplish the goal, it's like I want to study everything about kicking a ball. Naturally, I want to go, okay, I'm going to study everything I need to know about kicking a ball, so I know that immediately I'm going to go out there and I'm going to work on actually kicking it in the way that I studied it, but not necessarily relying on my sensory information, but relying on what I learned intuitively. And so when I'm kicking it, I'm correcting the form. It's, again, what did I reference in my head? It's like, what am I referencing? And again, and then how is it supposed to happen? What's the big picture of me kicking this ball? What am I trying to accomplish? Whereas it seemed to be a little more natural, because it's coming from, where does it connect? How does my foot hit it? I imagine, kind of what I'm hearing is, I imagine for you, when you hit that ball, it's like everything is a sequential, step by step, and you're able to break it down in your head step by step by step. My foot hit it this way, it connected with the ball this way, it put the spin on the ball this way, and it moved it this way. I mean, all of it probably makes a lot more sense. For me, it seems like a little faster of a motion. I can't feel individual steps. Would that sound right, or am I off on that?
Well, in the context of a game, it's never going to work that way.
Right. I'm talking about the technique itself.
So I guess maybe, like, when you have just a stationary ball,
mm-hmm.
you're just kicking it up against the wall, kind of like you would with a penalty kick, then there is that. Although, just part of getting older, I gravitate to what you did.
Right.
Like, well, I'm a read-write learner. Why don't I just read a frickin' book? Then I'll go try it. Because, you know, you don't want to waste your time reinventing the wheel when someone could just tell you quickly what you really need to know. And then, I mean, obviously I'm going to absorb based on sensory information still, but
right.
It's going to a place of introverted thinking.
Mm-hmm. judging which is working and which is not and ruling it out.
Yeah. So that's how it's going to encode into my long-term memory.
Right. And that's what I'm trying. Like I said, I'm trying to get into the shoes of what it's like, or put myself in the shoes of a dominant extroverted sensor. How is it different from me? Not so much by describing to the people, anybody who watches this video, not so much about going in there and actually saying, hey, you know, this is the difference between extroverted sensing and introverted intuition, or this is the difference between extroverted sensing and introverted sensing, which my videos are going to do, but more of I want them to have a personal experience from you, and I'm just asking questions, trying to get them to be able to put themselves in your shoes. What is it like differently? And it's a hard thing because, you know, there's a lot of biases and stereotypes out there that say extroverted sensors are the best athletes and everything else. And for me, it's like, maybe not, you know, you can't say that, because I know some extroverted sensing dominant people who are just not very good athletes, but it doesn't mean that they don't have that ability. Still doesn't mean they don't have that. So it's like their perception of the world is looking through an entirely raw and realistic lens, whereas everyone else kind of filters information. And so I ask these questions because I would like to see, or them to see, or any of the viewers of this video, what life is like as an extroverted sensor in the sense of the way you perceive the world. And it's very difficult. It's like you'd almost have to make a movie in first person to show what it's like being an extroverted sensor.
Well, it's so transparent because it's your senses. It's like, yeah, we were born with them. We all have them no matter what.
Yep.
And yeah, it is hard talking about them in such fine detail.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where the challenge is, because I mean, yeah, we all use our senses, and it's like for a brief moment for me, you know, and I use me as a comparison because I know me enough that when I'm perceiving information, I'm not, a lot of times when I'm learning something, I'm not even like mentally present. Half the time I'm hearing sensory cues, but it's like my mind is drawing a map, and that map to me is more clear than reality at times. And I lose definite sensory connection with the world, and sometimes it's like my mind is drawing out so much detail, and not details as in sensory details, but detail as in how you're painting this very large picture of what's going on. And I look at that sensory information, and I can switch out of it if I need to and get back in the sensory moment. Sometimes it's hard. And I remember a very specific time where I locked myself in introverted intuition one time, and I couldn't get out. And it was the most brutal thing. I could not get out of it. I just was frustrated. And I was frustrated because it was like I was not even reality, and I felt like I was in a lucid dream state. And I'll tell you what I did to get into that locked up state, so that way the viewers know that it was dangerous for me. And I don't know how it got there, because it's not like it happens to everybody doing this. Well, what I was doing was I was playing chess. And I was playing it on my computer, and I got a reasonably good computer with a good battery, and I was playing it, and I went to my breakfast table. I must have started, you know, playing chess on my computer at 9 a.m., just 9 o'clock a.m., I'll knock out a game real quick. Next thing I know, it was like 7 p.m. I didn't eat. I didn't move. I didn't anything. I had no concept of time. I didn't know I was there that long. It felt like 5 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. And I just totally disconnected from reality. And I don't know how long I took to move the pieces. I don't know. None of that really, I can't recall that information. I don't know what took so much time. It was one chess game. It wasn't 15. It wasn't 30. It was one. Wow. And I just went into this space of calculating all these possibilities. Like, if he moves here, I can move here. If he moves there, I can move here, 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 here. And if I move here, that's the result of that, here, here. And I can see what's predicting all the outcomes. And I would map the whole game based on one movement. And I would do that. And when I did that for every movement in chess, and every time there was a move, I guess it took me an hour to think in between moves. I don't know. I just have no sense of, I remember the only reason what kind of got me out of it, well, didn't get me out of it, but my computer died. Yeah. And I was like, what just happened? I thought my computer spazzed out, but then I realized it was 7 p.m. I didn't eat. I didn't move. And then I said, wow, this is ridiculous. I was kind of stuck in this hypothetical state where I was predicting outcomes, and I felt like I was in a dream state, like I couldn't get in reality. So what I did was to try to nudge myself back in extroverted sensing was I went outside and I was like, it's kind of crazy, right? I'd be like touching a tree and like, what do I feel right now? And if I didn't understand Myers-Briggs, I wouldn't know what was going on, but I was locked in this really deep intuitive state and I couldn't get out of it. So I was like feeling a tree and I said, you know what, I'm just going to run and try to breathe the air and be here right now and tell myself right here, right now, what do you feel? You know, and it finally like dislodged where I was like, okay, I'm back. It just freaked me out because I was like stuck. It was like it completely shut off extroverted sensing because I was such an intuitive, I was in this intuitive darkness almost. And it was just like, I didn't have a sense of reality. I felt like I was kind of just moving through life and I didn't have a sense of time. I didn't have a sense of things. And I was like, okay, I need to get a grip. What's going on? Fortunately, it was a weekend, so I didn't like miss work or anything. I was just like, it was a very freaky experience. Yeah. But that's an example of what it was like. And it's like, I can look at something and I don't even see that thing. I see what's in my head, you know, like boom. I can see the outcome. I can look at something and no longer the object of my focus no longer becomes important to me. What becomes important is what I'm extracting from that object, you know, so I can contemplate on like one of my friends, he said, he's like, I've seen you in some weird states in my life. And I'm like, what do you mean weird? And he goes, there's periods where we're talking just fine. And he's like, you just look away. And he's like, and then you just stare into this 1,000-yard stare and you're just gone. He goes, you're just gone. And I was like, yeah, I mentally check out sometimes. And I was like, and it's something either you said, something that happens, a noise happened, a picture or something. It triggered an event, a series of connections in my head. And it's like, I just mentally are aware of it. And it didn't synthesize anything, but I'm just seeing it all very clearly. And I'm like, wow. And then maybe a day or two later, it may have synthesized a new hypothesis or a new conclusion. And in the world of extroverted sensing, I'd imagine it's similar in the sense that you becoming totally entranced in the present moment. You know, maybe that's what's going on and that's it. And I can imagine that for a challenge that for an extroverted person who prefers extroverted sensing as their dominant function, that if they lose touch with calculating any outcome, it's just being here and now and overindulging on novelty experience in the moment. Not that you've had that problem, but I could imagine similar to my experience that they could get so locked into here and now and not calculating or predicting outcomes. What's your input on that?
I can definitely get trapped in a moment.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. It's just probably a question of stimulus because you've been talking about introverted intuition, which I'm going to actively suppress. Mine's going to be receiving sensory information.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, very different. But, you know, I have kind of a funny story, which I think might be about introverted intuition. Actually, it's not funny at all. But I had a few talks with my school's LSAT advisor because I was taking the LSAT. He said, if you get logic games for the first section, get up and walk out. And naturally, I did. The logic games in the LSAT, they require you to deal with some, you know, induction and deduction, you know, almost just switching back and forth between them, like what must be true or must not be true, what might be true or might not be true. And you have to just kind of get rid of the might not and make it must be or must not be. Usually to put things in order off of 3 or 4 clues. Mm-hmm. You know, they give you the 5 friends and this guy's before this one, this guy is before this one, except if this guy is doing something with the other one. They give you 3 or 4 of those and you got to deal with it. So we had finished it and we were in reading comprehension and I could feel it. It's like, oh crap. On that last one, if I had just done this one other thing instead, that would have changed my answer completely. And it was distracting me from the task at hand.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now I know why you walk out of logic games with the first section. And at the first break, I did. But I mean, I even told the people around me, I was like, if it starts with logic games, I'm walking out.
Wow. So that's kind of the so you didn't, I guess you didn't finish the LSAT then, right? You were just like, I'm done.
Yeah, I just walked out. And I haven't bothered taking it again because of the economics for law school, and being a lawyer just really don't support doing it. Unless you could get into one of those like top 14 schools.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling that was introverted intuition still processing at some level when I needed to be using extroverted sensing and introverted thinking to answer those reading comprehension questions.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, talk about a time for Dario to put an EEG on your head.
Exactly. You're like, go back. And it wanted to lock on what just happened and then figure out if I would have done that, then what it would have resulted in. What it would have resulted in is this, if I would have changed that one thing. And so I guess I was like, you know what? I hate it. I'm leaving.
Yeah. There are 4 scored sections on the LSAT.
Yeah, the writing and the logic games, the reading comprehension, and then the what is it? The other one?
One of them is experimental, and it's not scored, but you don't know which one it is. So you're going to get something twice. And yeah, I think I heard from him, if you get logic games twice, walk out. Just like if you get it first.
I like how they call it games.
Yeah, doesn't feel like much of a game.
Yeah, it sounds like logic hell.
Pretty much, yeah.
I love stuff like that, though. I remember I picked up a book and it had a puzzle in it, and I was at a bookstore and it had some kind of mind game to it and figure out what's next in the pattern type of thing. I must have just zoned out and went into this calculating outcomes mode, and I was so determined to solve it because you know what? They had a little caption at the bottom. It said, 1 out of every 100 people will solve this puzzle. I was not going to be the other 99.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I am not leaving until I solve this. So little do I know, as I stayed for a long time. I didn't buy the book. I just stayed to figure it out. And
yeah, I've done that once or twice. But
yes.
The ones in the Mensa puzzle books are fun. And
yes.
I think most of those can be solved by some sort of matrix.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just make a little like 3x3 or 4x4, and you can just check off possibilities once you know. In the logic games, you're doing different things because you're determining order, or you're determining where someone's like sitting at a table, or it's weird. It could be like, what temperature was it on this day?
Mm-hmm.
Because this one tree's leaves fell.
Yeah, they just give you all the data you need to try to figure it out.
Technically, all the data you need to figure it out.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because it's not, the answer's not clear, but yet all the data is there.
Yeah, and it gives you, I mean, I had the Kaplan book set, and it gives you 3 or 4 different ways of answering the various question types.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's pretty much everyone's least favorite part of the LSAT.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. I haven't taken it, so I wouldn't know, but
it's pretty obviously important when you're going through evidence and things are being presented out of order. Mm-hmm. In that sense, I can appreciate why someone would need to know it.
Right. I was just thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I was like, I can see why that's necessary. My mind had already figured out what the importance of it was. Like,
yeah,
I was like, yeah, I could see a situation where that would be beneficial. So, well, that's a interesting perspective, and I'm trying to really capture and prelude this video series like I said, about extroverted sensing. And this was it's a great time to connect because, again, I'm getting ready to release this video as soon as the editing is finished. And so that's where the key is, just trying to get people to understand what it's like to be an extroverted sensor versus just explaining this is what extroverted sensing is.
Yeah.
And it's I think the MBTI community has done an injustice for extroverted sensing. It's like, oh yeah, it's just physical senses. Well, yeah, but I mean, okay, but everybody has their physical senses. It's what is it like having that such a reliance on those physical senses, and how is life different when you do rely on the physical senses a lot more than anything else? So that's the key I'm looking for, and that was what I was really striving to accomplish with this video. And I'm looking forward to being able to get this other video series pumped out where I'm working on SESI and going through each of the cognitive functions and breaking it down in a way that I haven't done before. And we're back with enough evidence and enough different people's perspective of what it's like being there. That's what I'm looking forward to hearing in the near future. And I think that just getting those examples from you is a really great start for people to help them understand what it's like to be there. So I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So in the meantime, Mo, I'll go ahead and disconnect this call, but I look forward to connecting with you here in a little while, and then getting, obviously feedback from this kind of a freelance talk about extroverted sensing. I hate making things too long, try to keep them short so we keep the viewers' attention, obviously, and respect their time as well, so I don't make a 4-hour video. But hopefully we can get more deeper into, extroverted sensing and its combination with introverted thinking, kind of a process analysis, what actually goes on in that process versus somebody who has extroverted sensing and introverted feeling. What's the difference? And I really want to really tackle that. And hopefully you can give me some feedback. Maybe I can get an ESFP on here or even an ISFP and just have their angle on what it's like, to make decisions through introverted feeling, whereas you'll compare it with introverted thinking and the difference. I think that would be a great opportunity. So hopefully if I have anybody as an ISFP or ESFP that is watching this video, they would like to volunteer to do that, we could bring them on here and just kind of talk about life and through their perspective. And I think it would be a great conversation with two extroverted sensors, being able to talk about how they see the world and how they make their judgments quite differently.
I'd say you've heard of the guy called SP Spaz?
No, I have not.
He's got a YouTube channel. So it's SP and then Spaz, SPAZZZ or something like that. He's an ESFP. And he does all sorts of interviews.
Oh, cool. Yeah, maybe I'll see if I can reach out to him and get him
Plus, there's another guy, he goes by, well, his channel's name or his alias is Celebok.
Mm-hmm.
DELEBOK. And he's an ISTP.
Okay, that's a lot closer to the T personality, and that's an interesting perspective too. The more that I can have on there, the better. So I think that's a good start.
Yeah, and he can talk about extroverted sensing when it's not your dominant. Like whenever you're talking, if you're asking him about introverted thinking, extroverted sensing is going to come up for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then people being able to notice the difference between the two.
Yeah.
But that's another thing. That, like I said, I like volunteers, and maybe if somebody's interested in who's watching this video, that maybe they're trying to build a channel or they're working on something, maybe I can invite them as long as they have some kind of SP preference. What I would hate to have is a bunch of like SJs or NTs or on a topic that's about people who are experiencing the world through extroverted sensing, and that's what I really want to focus on. So hopefully we'll get some more people on this, and then we'll be there ready to go in the next video. But like I said, always I appreciate you coming on and volunteering your time to provide more value to viewers out there. That's awesome.
No, you're welcome. And once maybe if you have a question protocol developed, then I'm sure my answers would be better if I knew what something was ahead of time, so I could really think about a good story for you.
Sure, absolutely. And I'll make sure I'll start providing those as I structure these Hangouts a little more structured. One of my goals for my channel in the near future is to start structuring everything to where information is provided more sequentially. I'm trying to take the length of my videos and shorten them down, and that's done through structure. Originally, I just ad-libbed everything and I just didn't have a structure, so I'm working on structuring it. Didn't do it on this Hangout, gave you a topic, but I was like, okay, I'm going to ask you general questions on this. In the future, I'm going to start structuring everything, so we're shortening all these videos so people are getting more information in less time. So that's what I'm looking at accomplishing. So yeah, I'll give you a heads up on the questions in the next video, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Andrew.
See you later, Chad.
See ya. Bye.